Hello and welcome. Today we are going to be talking about success for all in the integrated classroom. My name is Natalie Doogan and I am in my third year of teaching fifth grade in the general education classroom setting. I am extremely passionate about students with disabilities and the special education system as well as integrated curriculum because I believe that is truly the way that students learn best. I believe that new teachers can gain a better understanding of this topic by really diving into what integrated curriculum is and how it can benefit our students with special needs and those IEPs for students with behavioral needs in the general education inclusive classroom setting. So to begin, all children deserve access to the best education possible, no matter what socioeconomic backgrounds they come from, who they are, who their families are. All children, whether they possess a disability or not, deserve access to the best education possible. But for those kiddos that have special needs or behavioral needs, it's imperative to ensure that they get what they need, be it academically, socially, and emotionally. All children deserve to have that access to any and all assistance that they may need to be successful, especially students with disabilities. They have just as much right to receive the best education possible. As the general education teacher, I believe it is essential that I implement each and every accommodation that students need to be successful, while also incorporating ones that I feel best fit the needs of that student. Again, all children deserve to have access, especially those students during this time of the pandemic when we are remote learning. When it comes to a classroom full of diverse learners, specifically children with disabilities, the proper accommodations, procedures, and specifics of the IEPs need to absolutely be followed. If students are not receiving the proper education to best meet their needs or do not have the assistance from proper people that are permitted to work with students with disabilities, like paraprofessionals, then students will not be meeting their highest potentials in and outside of the classroom setting. Staff like paraprofessionals are essential to providing services like those accommodations or interventions from a student's IEP, thus helping set the student up for success. If staff members such as paraprofessionals or the special education teacher or the general ed teacher are not being used for the purpose of servicing the students that need the accommodations most, then the students will find themselves being set out for an unsuccessful school year. So this leads me into the behind the scenes, things you never really realize until you actually become a teacher working with special ed students. So classrooms are inclusive settings. 90% of our classrooms are inclusive, and majority of the students receive push-in services. But how does this work when there aren't enough staff personnel to help? So gone are the days where students are, for majority of their school day, either being in a self-contained special ed classroom or being pulled out because they have found that inclusive settings are the best for students with IEPs to learn. And the less that they are taken out, the more successful they'll be. But there are issues where when there aren't enough staff to help, how do we go about this? Because the teacher has about 20-something other students to meet the needs of as well. So that leads to the next point. Paraprofessional and other staff such as the SPED teachers, ELL, OT, PT, they're pulled elsewhere other than the general education classroom setting that they're needed in, and that creates problems because then you're taking away from the students that truly need those staff personnel to help them be successful. There are schools and classrooms that are severely understaffed with that necessary support personnel. So teachers are double dipping their roles. They're acting as the paraprofessional, the special ed teacher, the OT, the PT to meet those daily mandatory goals, accommodations, and interventions. There are a lack in our specific school district of one-to-one aid assignments with students, which is a common thing that we are seeing now, especially with this pandemic, because A, not many schools are in person, and B, a lot of staff are either leaving the classroom or requesting permission to work from home. Most support staff does not actually perform their role. A lot are either pulled to sub, or some don't meet their daily tasks with the students that they are assigned to, and this leaves the teachers responsible to fill in those gaps for the missing daily goals or accommodations that the in-class para would typically be providing. Learning targets for this training will be what procedures can we implement so that all students can be successful in the classroom, and how can we ensure that these procedures are being followed with integrity? And the next one is, what is the most effective classroom setting for students with disabilities or behavior issues? So some success and failures of the inclusive classroom settings for students with IEPs, because we're really trying to focus on that learning target for this training, which would be finding those effective classroom settings for those students. Is inclusive better, or is the inclusive setting more detrimental to their academic success than an inclusive one would be? So some positives: the pullout systems are becoming ineffective, and push-in has proven to be more successful for students who remain in their general ed classroom settings with their classmates, those peers, and all of the teachers, and being in one consistent spot. Another positive would be students all grow to be more accepting of all human differences that they will come across in the world. So not only is it benefiting students with disabilities or behavioral problems that need those IEPs and those BIT plans, those behavior intervention plans, but it's also helping the peers around them being in that inclusive setting. So it's a win-win. And then pulling students out of the classroom denies them their access to the same curriculum and instruction from their teacher and that their classmates are receiving, therefore making inclusion that much more necessary. Every student has their basic human rights to receive the same education as the next person to them. Inclusive classroom negatives. Remote learning has made it quite difficult to implement an inclusive classroom setting and to meet the needs of students with IEPs without physically seeing them in school. So there are a lot of students that require a lot of hands-on, like scribes, people to note take for them, to translate for them, or to read a piece of material out loud, to help hand over hand, to work on those fine motor skills, and many more. Adding students with special needs into a public classroom setting that is already deemed to be overburdened lessens the effectiveness of the education for the students overall, but especially those students with special needs. So a lot of general ed classroom settings are already overburdened, and it might be too much for students with disabilities and those high demands to be in those inclusive settings. Therefore, going back to our learning target, taking away from that success of the student and having it not be as effective, especially for those students that have behavioral issues where they cannot be in a very overstimulating or overburdened classroom setting. Students with special needs face added stress and pressures in regular education classrooms because they may directly compare themselves and their classroom performance to their non-disabled peers. What does a successful classroom for all students look like? There's consistent schedules, placement decisions where it's in the best interest of the student, not the adult, maintaining integrity in difficult learning situations, and accommodations will look different in different settings. So, consistent schedules are extremely important. So here's an example of the schedule that I provide each and every day. So a schedule helps ease any nerves. It is right there explaining exactly what we're doing at exactly what time. There's no surprises, and that can be a huge help to students with disabilities or those IEP goals where they need to follow a set schedule each and every day. So an example is on Google Slides, a daily assignment is posted for each individual lesson and at what time, and any other reminders or announcements. And then below is a detailed schedule. And each day is highlighted in kind of like a confetti balloon. And it also has the Google Meets logo, so the students know at exactly what time we would be meeting. And each day this is posted, it remains up, and I remind the students of it every so often. Schedules are extremely important because it also helps students specifically with autism spectrum disorder who need everything done at the exact time and need to know when things are happening. And it also helps our students with behaviors so that we can say, all right, first you're going to complete your science and social studies, then we'll take a break, and then we will move to our specials such as PE, art, or music. So that also helps keep them on track. Placement decisions, best interest of the student. So the placement decisions need to be in the best interest of the student, not the teachers, not the classmates, but students need to be placed in a setting where it'll best benefit them. In other words, if they need that inclusive setting and they need their peers to help them, and they need that extra teacher support that is in the classroom setting, then that is where they need to go. If they learn best being pulled out 2 times during the day, but for the remainder of the school setting, they need to, they need to be in the classroom, then that is the placement in which works best for them. Or in remote, for example, if a student needs to receive the whole group instruction from the teacher, but then go into a breakout room with the special ed teacher to kind of receive a reiteration of that lesson that was just taught, then that would be the case. That would be the best placement for the student. Maintaining the integrity in difficult learning situations. Maintaining integrity in difficult situations like remote learning in a pandemic is so important because students still need to receive their accommodations. Students still need to learn. They have the right to learn. That is their basic human right, and you need to maintain that integrity. You cannot slack off due to being virtual. Accommodations will look different in different settings. So, successful classroom for students, accommodations are never going to be the same for any 2 students. So that leads me into accommodations in person versus remote learning. So accommodations in person, a student needs a note taker or a scribe. A redesigned accommodation to fit remote learning would be a dictation tool where it can transfer speech to text for that student by the click of a mouse. Student needs a 5-minute break when they are overwhelmed. Student can access the calm room breakout rooms via Google Meets to access some social emotional learning activities, some timed videos using calming music, visual timers if they do not have those tactile like putty or physical calmers like the squishies or anything of that nature. Student has an aid, read aloud all materials and directions. A dictation tool on Google Extensions can, on the Chromebooks that the students do have access to, can transfer text to speech and read aloud for that student. Headphones are not necessary, but if they need that for that added sensory and also for closer listening, headphones could be provided by the school. Accommodations in person, in general, in-person instruction, like the delivery of the lesson. Redesigned accommodations to fit that remote learning. That student can receive pre-recorded lessons so that they not only access the live lesson, but then they also have access to the pre-recorded video that is done at their pace that would best fit their academic needs so that they can go back and re-access that and even access it and watch it with this the SPED teacher if they were to break out into a separate Google Meets room remotely. If a student has accommodations that include visual presentations of verbal materials such as images or word webs, applications like Jamboard, Nearpod, Padlet, Whiteboard, and so on can be used. So here's how you can do it. Strategies for success in supporting all students. We are in a totally new normal of learning. Remote teaching, so in other words, virtual e-learning, will most likely be an option for students for the foreseeable future for now, even when a vaccine comes out. That is our new normal probably for the remainder of this current school year and maybe the beginning of next. Teachers need to be able to work with students online and uphold the accommodations and the integrity of each and every IEP for those students. And what's really great is that you, as the teachers, will be one step ahead of the game by anticipating these shifts in education, because this will form exactly how we do things in the future, starting now. Because now we're even looking at when snow days are happening, we can e-learn. And how do we meet that students' service goals or their services that they're supposed to receive on that day that we are no longer in school? Well, we can easily do it through different applications on the computer. So my impact, how this has impacted me, I believe that it has made me a better educator all around, because going back to those learning targets, we can easily find so many applications simply by using Google Slides, adding in a daily schedule, posting that daily schedule, using different applications like Whiteboard, Jamboard, Padlet, online dictation tools, pre-recorded lessons using applications like Loom, and so on, that we can ensure that the procedures are, and breakout rooms that we can follow with integrity to maintain these goals and these accommodations that our students with IEPs, academically or behaviorally, need to and have the right to receive. So I believe through this, I have found the most effective classroom setting for students with disabilities or behavior issues is in the inclusive classroom general ed setting, with those support staffs pushing in or being in all day, every day. We need to keep in mind that support staff and teachers' ignorance to inclusion does change over time, even though there are some disadvantages to classroom settings, and teachers do have every reason to exhibit hesitance about the classroom settings due to lack of support staff or not being able to meet the needs, especially during this time of a pandemic where we are remote teaching. We do need to understand that no matter what, at the end of the day, it comes down to our attitudes as a teacher and our mindset to enhance the inclusive education classroom environment, thus being reflective on our own pedagogy and teaching styles. And students do deserve to learn, and we have found that it is possible to provide those accommodations in an effective way to make sure that we maintain and promote the success for our students. There will be more links to access, so you can find those different applications that we can use to allow us to ensure these procedures are being followed with integrity for our students. So, looking forward, again, receiving this training is making you one step ahead of the game just by anticipating these shifts in education, where we really need to keep in mind those accommodations that we were so used to doing daily and having those support staff. We really need to make that shift and get into the mindset of remote learning, because this is our new normal of learning for the foreseeable future. And every student, going back to that quote, they deserve access to the best education possible, no matter what socioeconomic background they come from, who they are, or who their families are. Thank you.